New data from the CDC reveals that gun homicides spiked 35% from 2019 to 2020 during the first year of the pandemic.
We want to bring in now the Vice Chair of the House Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, Colorado Congressman Joe Neguse. Congressman, it is good to have you here with us, and you're from the state of Colorado that has a really odd place in American history, if you will, if you go back to Columbine, that high school shooting, and then of course people remember Aurora, and of course just last year Boulder, in your district, the supermarket shooting there. I guess with all that's happened in your state, is that part of the reason that has kind of spurred you to try to do something now on gun violence?
Look, I think the American people agree that the Congress needs to take action on gun violence to save lives. There are common sense steps that we could take today that ultimately would save lives. Those include universal background checks, a number of other measures that we've proposed. But I also believe that it's not mutually exclusive to taking preventative steps as well. And that's why we've recently announced a series of bills working with workers, with employers, with law enforcement, with district attorneys to try to find consensus-driven approaches to try to prevent these, unfortunately, tragedies from happening.
Congressman, as you mentioned, yes, you have a package of bills, 4 to be specific, to stop gun violence, also to support the victims of it. Can you legislate your way out of this problem?
Well, look, I don't think that failure is an option, right? I mean, my constituents are demanding action. They expect the Congress to take this seriously. We've lost too many lives, too many families that have been impacted by the devastating impacts of gun violence. And so they expect the Congress to take action. And that's why we proposed the bills that we have. I do believe that the steps that we've proposed would ultimately save lives. Just to give you one example, a bill that we've introduced called the Stop Violence Act would increase grant funds for local communities, for employers, for places of public accommodation, grocery stores, churches, to be able to invest in security systems, right, to ultimately better prevent these mass tragedies from happening. So I think that's an example of a common sense step that we could take today on a bipartisan basis that ultimately would save lives.
Congressman, can you help us with that? What the legislation is going to, you hope it provides money. I guess I'm trying to get from the legislation to saving lives, and you say preventative measure. Sure. What are we talking about? You're going to, or you want to give, like, who would get this money? How do you decide it goes to this church versus that school or versus that movie theater? How do you decide that? Does the legislation do that? And what type of preventative measures are we talking about?
It's a great question. So there's a program within the Department of Justice that was created in the aftermath of 9/11 to help our cities, our counties, and various retail establishments better protect against potential terrorist attacks. This bill that we've proposed, which is supported by members of law enforcement, by workers, by victims, and many others, would essentially restructure that program so that mass shooting type events would ultimately be covered. What that means, just as a practical matter, is it would enable a grocery store, a church, a city, a county to be able to access funds through the Department of Justice to enhance the security at their particular location. Now, it's going to depend on the community at issue, and of course we want to be responsive to the conditions on the ground. For some retail establishments, that might be real hardening of systems, right? Exit ramps and a variety of other security strategies that have been recommended as best practices. So we think that it's a bill that could have a real impact.
And Congressman, while you're obviously focused there on stopping and preventing gun violence, you're also dealing with another massive threat. The West currently facing severe drought. New Mexico's battling its second largest wildfire on record. Obviously, your state as well, a neighboring state, is dealing with extreme fire risk. What measures are you trying to put in place to protect the residents there of Colorado? And of course, this can be an incredibly costly venture to fight these fires once they happen.
Well, as you know, in Colorado and in the Rocky Mountain West, we no longer have fire seasons. We have fire years. The wildfires in Colorado and in the Rocky Mountain West, as a result of climate change, which has exacerbated drought conditions here on the ground, have made wildfires more intense and more pervasive. They are happening literally all day, every day throughout the year. The most destructive wildfire in the history of Colorado happened in my district on New Year's Eve in December. So it is really really, in my view, a wake-up call for policymakers to take this seriously in Washington. We have to invest a lot more in mitigation, in resiliency, in preparedness. There's a lot more that we could do to better protect our communities from the onslaught of wildfires. And then, of course, as you mentioned, we've got to invest more in suppression. We have introduced a bill in the Congress, the Western Wildfire Support Act, which would invest millions of dollars for western states in particular to be able to better battle the flames of these fires. And we think that's an important step. But we also, as I mentioned, have to be focused on the mitigation part of this as well, that part of the equation. The Forest Service just recently announced a historic effort as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law to treat forests across our country, to engage in reforestation and mitigation within our national forests, which so often are the sites of these mega fires.
And while we have you, we'll get one more topic in here. Of course, the Senate did pass a bill to boost security for Supreme Court justices. You all are expecting that to come your way, Judiciary Committee that you sit on. Is that going to pass the House in a bipartisan way as well?
I certainly hope so. It's certainly a bill that I support, and I hope that we take it up expeditiously.
I'm not sure how many more topics we can get in there, Congressman. I think we'll leave it there, my man. It's Colorado Congressman Joe Neguse, sir. Good to have you as always. Look forward to having you back on the program.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.